piggyback on what Councillor Marsh said with regards to anchoring in the signs. I appreciate that you're going to do that on Waterloo Street. I'm wondering if we find that, and hopefully we don't, but that, you know, partway through this, I don't know if we need a motion or something to go with this, but that we'll look at maybe doing the flexi signs there or some other kind of restorative repair there. Are there some options?
Through the chair to the councillor, so we're going with the same locations as last year for a number of reasons. One of which is that the residents and the street users in those locations are aware of the signs. They understand the purpose to some extent. So we hope we don't see tampering in most locations like we did last year. We do have some budget available. So if we do see an excessive amount of tampering in one location, our ops staff are ready to help us out with that. And this year, again, it's another pilot year, and we're going to be doing a lot of data collection, which I can get into a little bit, working with Aviva Canada and a company called Numina. So we are ready to deal with the tampering, and I think we've addressed the hot spot using the semi-permanent locations on Waterloo.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councillor Schneider, can you take over the meeting? I have to address something. Sorry about that.
I have another question, Councillor Schneider, so I'll just go ahead, or I guess a comment. So there is a mistake in the report where it mentions, excuse me, sorry about that, where it mentions Dunbar Road is losing their slow street, and it should be Avondale. So I'll just add that to be fixed. Thank you.
Okay. I'm seeing Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I had some questions on both the streets and the food trucks. First on the streets, you talk about having a engagement with the residents. Did we do this last year? Was there a report or a survey that you prepared that told us how it went? Or is
Through the chair to the councillor, no. And that was part of what we found through our Roscoe report and lessons learned from 2020. So it wasn't until fairly recently that the project team felt that this initiative should be considered again for 2021. As you're aware, Slow Streets is very much a reactionary measure to the pandemic, and it became apparent that the pandemic would continue into 2021, or as it became apparent, we felt it was appropriate to reconsider the program. And one of our lessons learned from last year was the lack of engagement. It was a rapid implementation approach. And we did make the decision relatively quickly to recommend it to council this year, but we will be rolling out surveys both for road users and for those that live on the streets to understand how they feel about the program. And the data collection program I mentioned earlier, every slow street will have a smart sensor installed, and it's a partnership with Aviva Canada and Numina, paid for by Aviva Canada. And it's a partnership that's actually looking at Halifax and Kitchener, specific to pandemic-related street safety campaigns and how well they work. So all that information, we'll bring that back to the end of the year or after the program wraps up.
Is there any reason why some parts of this program wouldn't work well without a pandemic? Am I muted or?
Through the chair to the councillor, in terms of locations that wouldn't work?
No, yeah. I mean, if it worked well, it's a different. If it worked well, why wouldn't we sort of consider this type of thing in a normal year?
Through the chair to the councillor, at this point, we just don't have a handle on how well it works in terms of reducing cut-through traffic and increasing safety for residents that are walking and providing that flexibility if they do need to step out onto the street for social distancing. And we just don't have a handle on how well received it is with the community. And the reason we don't have a handle on that is just because how quickly we had to implement it last year, and we had staffing impacts that really impacted our ability to evaluate and collect all that data. So those are the lessons learned that we're going to apply for this year and make sure we collect and determine if there is utility here for 2022, even in a non-pandemic environment.
Okay, and that's the only point I wanted to make. It seems to me it might be a helpful tool to come upon a street that at the end of the street it says this is a sleepy street or whatever the hell you call them, and people take it easy. So it's I just didn't want you to close the door on that going forward. Okay, and you're saying you're not.
Through the chair, if I may add, I mean, we're not closing the door in terms of rolling this program out in the future, but one thing to keep in mind is the driver behind this program really was the ability to be physically distant, and especially in areas that are more dense and didn't have the ability to get out of more of our recreational trails. So yes, the program may continue beyond the pandemic, but we can't lose sight of why we established the program in the first place. And that's why that data collection piece will be the driver for the program potentially moving forward.
Okay, thank you. On the food trucks, have we picked a spot where the second vehicle can go?
Through you, Chair, we haven't picked a spot yet. We are still working with park staff and Victoria Working Group and the ECDEV team to pick a spot that will work for both vehicular and pedestrian traffic.
I was trying to follow the rules that are involved with this, and there's this 2-hour rule. So if somebody goes into Victoria Park to one of your two spots, they can only sit in that spot for 2 hours? Is that right?
Through you, Chair, the 2-hour max was for the on-street parking in residential zones. In Victoria Park, there's actually there's no maximum amount of time that they can stay there.
So what are the rules as to who gets to go where? Like Victoria Park must be a good site, right? So who gets that opportunity?
So right now, the way it works is there is one paved spot near the playground, and it's a first come, first served basis. So whoever gets there first gets that spot. We're looking at options for the second spot, whether it's a first come, first serve, or we require programming in which we schedule different food trucks based on their interest to come in on different dates.
How did that work? When did you ever run into any big arguments as to who got to use the spot?
I wouldn't say there were any big arguments. There were at times that certain food trucks had to leave because there was another one in that space.
Councillor Gillot, can I get you to queue back in? Because if you've had 5 minutes and Councillor Singh has a question.
No, I will leave. I didn't think I had 5 minutes. That's okay. Go ahead.
Councillor Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Schneider. This question is more so for Barry and Aaron. I'm glad to hear that there will be some consideration of data collection on the slow streets. Are we already anticipating a certain allocation in the budget for 2022? So that depending on the data that we collect, that I agree with Councillor Guzzola that obviously if we see success from this program, that it's just a speed calming measure, that we could see this outside of a COVID year. More especially, I've heard your response saying that, again, the impetus was for social distancing and people having to come onto the street as well. But as our neighborhoods or community gets more congested, more growth, more development, again, it's just having that extra allowance on some streets could be a benefit to the overall community. So regarding the budget allocation in 2022. So just data is not enough if you don't have the budget for the coming year.
Yeah, through the chair, this is, this is something that I would consider another tool in the toolbox, so to speak, when we start talking about seasonal traffic calming in 2022. So if we were to transition this program outside of the pandemic, that's where it would generally fit. It would be a program that would really fit well within seasonal traffic calming. So we would have that discussion about budget then. I do think that there is the ability to build upon that program with this program if it proves successful. And so that's where I would see it fitting within that budget.
No, I appreciate that. But again, depending on the data, and I'm hoping that the data that's collected is in time as we prepare the 2022 budget. So depending on the report, that subsequent report that will come back to council, and I'm hoping there will be, depending on the information that we get out of it, all of this, that if it's of an interest, which already is for me, then we can consider, depending on the other priorities, and seeing what allocation we want to place for 2022.
Through the chair again, I think that there's a good opportunity to tie it to the seasonal traffic calming budget. And I do think that there would already be some room in there to be able to facilitate this type of program. So I think we'll be in a good spot in 2022 if it's something that we want to see moving forward.
On top of us wanting to buy a ton more flexi signs, no?
I think that's a conversation that we'll have at a later date.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Gazzola, you can continue with your questions now.
Should I set my timer up? I just wanted just a quick understanding. Last year we had 25 of these food trucks signed up. Does that mean all 25 of those were out on the roads at various times, or and where does it stand now?
Through you, Chair. That means we had 25 licensed vehicles in the city last year. We don't know how many chose to operate in the residential zones, but it did mean that any of those 25 could have operated in residential zones. As for our numbers this year, we extended our due date this year as part of the business support relief to June 30th. So not all food trucks have renewed, but we have 15 renewed thus far.
Okay, what I was trying to get at, I was just trying to understand what kind of feedback was there. Did this program work well? Were there any big problems? What was the result of you opening it up last year?
For you, Chair, we heard no negative comments. We only received positive feedback, limited feedback, but positive feedback from the community and from the food truck operators.
And so if we do get back up to 30, 35 vehicles, there's no reason why they all can't be out there trying to get a little business.
That's correct. They could choose to operate there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Any comments? Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. So I'm pleased to support this motion or the recommendation. I don't know if it's been moved or not.
It hasn't yet.
I'll move it.
Okay.
And so I know that food trucks was kind of a contentious issue back in 2014, and now it's just yeah, we're gonna for sure have food trucks, and it's no big deal. And so I'm really pleased to support it. And then also, of course, the Slow Streets Initiative is maybe not as widely embraced, but it is, people do feel that it's useful in there when they have a specific type of congested or narrow street. I do also want to mention now that I'll be sharing in time for council a letter that the Cycling and Trails Advisory Committee has put together to thank the federal government for initiating a green fund that would allow for more funding for programs such as this. So, so I'm just giving you a heads up that that'll come, and I hope that it can be supported at council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Gazzola, you have comments?
Yes, I did have one other question, but I'll cover it in my comments. I'm pleased to support this type of program. This is a program that does what you seem to be wanting to do, help businesses out. This gives these businesses an opportunity to make some money, to make some extra efforts, and it's an activity that we can participate in, and it doesn't seem to cost our taxpayers any dollars, and yet it does bring activity to our community, to our neighborhoods, and especially at this time. So I'm totally supportive of it, especially when I hear that we've had it in place for a year and we've had nothing but apparently positive comments on it. I was going to ask another question. Apparently the hours are from 11 to 8, and I wondered why we wouldn't allow that to go to from 11 to 9.
Through you, Chair, we chose 11 to 8 just to minimize the amount of impact on in the evening in neighborhoods for people putting their kids to bed and such. And it was a time that back when the business licensing bylaw, that seemed to be the feedback we received from the community.
Okay, I just it seems to me I expected that would be one of the answers you would give me, that it's always about putting the kids to bed, but I thought then 11 to 9 works out into 10 hours. If you had any fights, that's 5 2-hour slots, but that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Marsh, so all in favor? Okay, and that passes. Councillor Ioannidis, are you back and ready to take back over?
Yeah, sorry about that. Just
no worries. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Schneider. Okay, so we will move on to item number 3, dealing with the 2021 Community Grants Tier 2. And do we have any questions? Okay. Okay, we have a couple. There's no presentation. So Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. So I noticed that there is only, well, I'd have to go through the list again, but there's one visual arts organization. None have received money. And I was wondering why we haven't funded Globe Studios, who I know are struggling right now.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to speak generally, and then I'm not sure if Ms. Kozlowski can speak to it. I'm not even sure that Globe Studios applied for a grant, but if they did, she could probably speak to it. We do not look sector by sector in that regard, that specifically. So we don't say 50% goes to visual arts and 20% goes to community development. I actually do recall that they did have a grant, but it was a request for capital funding, which is specifically not allowed within the Tier 2 grant process. So it was not an eligible application.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yes. Can somebody tell me what Cycle Waterloo Group is? What is that? Is that a City of Waterloo group?
So through you, Mr. Chair, maybe Ms. Kozlowski can respond. It's one of our sports groups that supports residents in both areas.
Does Waterloo support that also, the City of Waterloo?
The chair, I can look into that and get back to you. They are a group that runs a cycling race in Victoria Park.
The apparently there's a surplus of $71,000, $72,000. Why wouldn't that financial? Why wouldn't that just go into our city surplus?
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's staff's opinion that there will likely be a desire from the community to do some form of community celebration when we can finally start to gather again and COVID restrictions relax. The community is going to want to, in one way or another, celebrate everything we've been through and commemorate, maybe through public art, certainly through events and festivals. And there is no budget right now for an initiative like that. So staff are simply saying, instead of coming and asking you for new money, this seems like a related source of funding that could be used to support that community work.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. Just can I ask another question now? Now, if a group, I understand if a group gets grants under Tier 2 for 5 years in a row, they automatically move into Tier 1. And is that correct?
I would say to you that 90% of the time that's correct. There are some times when groups don't want to move into Tier 1, or there may be certain situations, but generally as a policy, yes, they do.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then when they move into Tier 1, the amount of available grants in Tier 2 decreases?
That's correct. So we have one large bucket of money that goes towards Tier 1 and Tier 2, and you take the money from Tier 1 first. So council approved that on final budget day. So as we move groups in there, that bucket of money has to be increased, and it subsequently decreases the Tier 2 funding. I can say that through the work of staff and council over the past 5 or 10 years that I've been involved in the grants program, despite that, we've always found a way to continually build up the Tier 2 pot.
Okay, I was just going to say, theoretically, in the fullness of time, Tier 2's gone. Everybody's in Tier 1. And by that time, we're a big city. We're going to have other people that want Tier 2, and there's no money there. But you're telling me you're looking after that, so that's fine. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gazzola, just for a note for you for your issues, technical issues. I'm not sure if others are getting the same. It seems like every time when you are speaking, I don't know whether it's your speaker, we get a ton of feedback and it's choppy. I'm just wondering if everyone else is getting that. I only see one person, or I see a couple nodding, so I'm not. All right.
Maybe does this sound better here?
It sounds a bit better.
I'm sort of sitting back and relaxing, and I guess I shouldn't be doing that.
Oh no, I'm still hearing feedback. Anyways, I'm not sure whether it's your mic or not. But anyways,
those are the spirits that have been in this house for the last year and a half. I can't get rid of them.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it could be his internet connection as well. So, no, I have complete confidence in staff and carrying on the Tier 2, Tier 1 grant. I think always capacity has been able to found. I think we'll continue to do that. Mr. May, do you, the way this year is turning out to be unexpected with the third wave, and it's not seeming to let up anytime soon, and it's difficult to foresee exactly how the summer will look like as well. Do we foresee that there may be some additional room that may come out of Tier 2 going into the end of this year?
So we've done a bunch of deliberate work to really understand the applicant's plans as it relates to COVID. And in some cases, if that were to arise, we would agree to reallocate the money to, say, allow them to go online and use their online platform. So in most, if not all cases, in 2020, groups needed the funding for a related cost, and we were shifting that money to support that group.
Okay, and I do support the setting aside the $71,000. I think there will be some amazing opportunities that will come out of this, and there needs to be a moment of celebration and memorial in this community, and we have to have the necessary dollars for it. So I'm glad to see. But one avenue I do want to, I just, I want to take advantage of this opportunity that we were talking about some access monies. I sit on the Kitchener and Bloom committee along with Councillor Schneider as well. And recently we had discussion in the committee, and they lost the funding room that they had in 2021 as the overall budget. The 10,000 something that's allocated to them was shifted away because there wasn't necessarily room for them to plan out an event this year either. But that's not to say that there isn't desire for them to do something else, something different than an event, perhaps make inroads and connections with communities. Is there a way that they could still seek out funding for this year? Or is that the hard answer that they have to receive that, sorry, the money's been taken away for this 1 year? Or could there be some room and some allocation of this funds be reprioritized back to them?
Yeah, so through you, Councillor Ioannidis, it's certainly something I'd be happy to discuss with you offline, Councillor Singh. The neighborhood development grant, the Love My Hood grants strike me as a possibility, but I don't know exactly what they would have planned. So I think perhaps you and I could take it offline and discuss that issue further.
Okay, then I'll reach out to you. They are hoping for some opportunities for this year. And if there is room elsewhere as well, I'm glad to hear. So I support this, and Councillor Ioannidis, if no one has moved it, I'd be happy to move it as well.
Okay, it's been moved by you. Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I just want to thank, please pass along our thanks to the committee that oversees the Tier 2 grants. And, this is always tough to turn requests down, even if they don't officially qualify. So thank you, and thank you to all the groups that have applied and who are going to keep moving, keep trying to do their work in this context. And so I sent out a link to you guys by email just to say that Cycle Waterloo, even though it has the Waterloo name, it's focused in downtown Kitchener, and it's like one of the few Canadian cycling sanctioned events for elite cyclists, and it's pretty amazing to watch if you ever happened upon it. It's the end of July usually. I don't know that they'll be able to pull it off this year, but hopefully, by then we will be in better times.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think I'd be remiss, and I think everyone who's on the selection committee and then on the appeal committee would be very angry with me if I didn't give a big shout out to Carrie and the work that she does. She is really the brains and the workhorse behind this program. And what council wouldn't see is the numerous improvements she's made to the application and selection process, all of them to make it easier for the community groups. So I want to reflect that good work that she's been doing to bring this report forward.
Excellent. And yeah, thank you, Carrie, and thanks to the rest of the team. I'm always glad to see how this program has evolved over the years and how efficient it has become and less of a political pancake that was in the past. Anyways, with that, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. And so that concludes the Community and Infrastructure Service Committee for April 19th, 2021. Thank you, everyone.